to all, or at least masses of other sentient beings. And that's the long path, that's the heroic path. It really is, described as being very long, and you have to go through lots of hardships. But that's the highest level to which we can evolve. So that's the most useful for other beings. We meditate on their suffering, so we really want to be useful to them as well. But if that's all too difficult and all too long, there's the intermediate sort of stage where you can just go for your own liberation, right? You're just going for your own freedom from suffering. So you're just going for nirvana, but just that means it's you getting out of cyclic existence, you getting to safety, you getting to a place of calm and peace. But of course, while you're doing that, you can be helping other people. But when you get there, it's just like you're sort of cut off in sort of a solitary peace. You're just meditating on emptiness, and nothing bothers you. So you kind of left other beings behind. So you're no longer concerned about them. You're no longer in touch with them. They can no longer be in touch with you. So that's sort of, second being, yeah? And then the last being, we said three beings. The third one is that person who's, they haven't got the capacity or the education or the resources in this lifetime, whatever it is. So they can't think in terms of completely getting out of suffering for themselves. They can't think in terms of complete Buddhahood. So they're just going to improve their lot within psychic existence. So it's still counted as a Dharma path, because they're not just, trying to have all the fun of just being in this life. They're seriously trying to, improve their rebirth in the future. So it is thinking about going beyond this life. And it is thinking about, trying to do virtuous actions, avoid negative actions, purify negativities, and so on. So it includes many of those practices, which all the three types of beings have to do. It's definitely a Dharma practice, definitely a spiritual path, we could say, in our sort of, language, a spiritual approach, because they're going beyond this life. But that's the most modest kind of approach. Yeah? So you're just ensuring beneficial future rebirth. But we all have to do that, even if we are going for Buddhahood, or even if we are going for solitary liberation, still we have to think that, it's going to take some time. We need to ensure we have fortunate, suitable conditions in the future when we pass away from this life. So the paths aren't completely separate, all going in different directions. It's just like, we're going in the same direction, but some people go further and some people go further still. But anyway, three types of beings. One's going for just their own, beneficial status in the future within cyclic existence in another life. Those are going to try to cut off the weary round of cyclic existence altogether for themselves. And the one going to some complete Buddhahood, so they're fully empowered not to leave others behind, but always working for the benefit of others, also with that supreme state of Buddhahood. Yeah, so all these three are described in the Lamrim text, and what could be better, to fit into that sort of approach. Verse number 10. For certain, to explain or hear but once this essence brief of scriptures all accrues vast benefit of teaching, listening to true Dharma. Contemplate its meaning then. So this is like as we said, a condensation, or a bringing together of all the important points of all the scriptures. So just by hearing this teaching on the Lamrim, it's as if you were listening to the great, the whole scope of Buddha's teachings. It brings them all, into one kind of, easy to practice path. So that's how marvelous that is. So let's take advantage. It's a very special kind of achievement by people like Atisha and Tsongkhapa to be able to do that. So those are kind of the introductory verses. Then having been inspired that we really want to meditate on these things, have the blessings of the Buddha, we take refuge, and this is really, what I should be doing. So what are the actual points of practice? What are the actual stages that we have to sort of meditate on and practice, and kind of what kind of attitudes do we have to develop in our mind in order to be take advantage of this path that is so highly praised. Well, let's not go too slowly, because We haven't, we want to get through a few verses here. Correct and strong reliance in thought and deed upon a spiritual guide who shows the path, it is the root cause well propitious for all excellence of this and future lives. Though life may be the cost, delight him with the offering of doing what he says or she says. I too a yogi, practiced in this way. You too, who yearn for freedom, do the same. So traditionally in these Tibetan Lamrims, this is the subject that's put at the beginning. Tsongkhapa was inspired to do that, try to rely on a spiritual guide. This is very beneficial for your progress. Yes, you can study books, and you must study the books, and compare with one book what it says with another, and really do a proper case of a proper job of studying what we should be doing and working things out. But on top of that, the guidance of somebody who's knowledgeable in these matters is very, very beneficial. It's very, very useful. If they have got high realizations, they kind of rub off on you, you know what I mean? I mean, it's not like you just get the realizations from them just by being with them, but it makes such an enormous difference. By the sound of it, they're just teaching. Somebody who hasn't got the realization can teach, and it sounds authentic. And somebody who has got the realization teaches, and it may sound something in words. It may sound the same advice, and the same correct points are made, and the same nobody's making any mistake in what they're saying. But somehow the person who's got the bodhicitta, the person who's got the the complete development of the attitude they're talking about, or somebody who's realized emptiness, they're teaching somehow as special power and a special way of opening up your mind or something. If you've ever been to teachings like Dalai Lama, you might have felt that. I don't know. If he comes to the West, he usually just teaches for one afternoon, or just doesn't teach for very long. But if you've been to a longer teaching, like I was lucky in Dharamsala when he used to teach there for sometimes 10 days or 12 days in one long teaching. So by the end of that, you really felt that you'd been affected, not on an intellectual level, but just the blessings are so strong. It's like you're just somebody who'd open the door of a furnace, and the fire is like blazing out at you. Just the heat of the furnace when they open the door. You get the strong power of the red heat coming out. So it's something like that, in the end. And I'm not a sensitive person. Somebody who's really sensitive, they would feel more than that, I'm sure. And that's just not me. I'm not somebody who's like, particularly sort of imaginative, but you really felt that the Dalai Lama was just, he had you, and so showing you all this power just by his presence, just by being near to him. So on YouTube and so forth, you get teachings. You can probably feel some strong blessing too, especially if there's a live teaching. But to be in the presence of somebody live like that, even though it's a huge audience, many people, it meant something. So this idea of relying on a spiritual guide as your personal teacher is who really has got realization. They're very fortunate, So not so easy to come by. Somebody who's has those realizations are not so common. To find them in the West is all the more difficult, of course. But anyway, it's that's the kind of advice we're getting here. So we can't get it all out of books. And even have a spiritual guide that doesn't have such marvelous realizations. If we have faith, and kind of, just see them as somebody who is quite advanced, and see them as somebody who is, sort of above us in their progress, and just don't see their faults, but see their good qualities, and see them in a sort of a special way as being a special treasure for you, a special appearance of Buddha energy, on your level for your life. It can be very, very helpful for your progress. But yeah, we're not saying you must force anything, just take it naturally as it comes. I never went around thinking, oh, I've got to think of my teachers all as Buddhas or something. But and the teachers I had in my classes when I was studying in the School of Buddhist Dialectics in India, and I did, just over the years, we had teachers who taught us there for like 10 years, 12 years, a really long kind of course of study when you do your Geshe studies. So gradually, over the length of time, they start to impress you, like how dedicated they are and how kind they are, in spending 10 years of their life teaching our class of just sort of average guys like me, So you can awaken a great sense of gratitude, and that's very helpful. That's very proper, relying on a spiritual guide. But you have to be careful, of course. We all know there are everything genuine has its fakes. Anything genuine has its forgeries, whether it's watches or fashion clothes or Buddhas. There are those who look like the real thing, but they're not. So you don't just sort of jump into a guru-disciple relationship, just because you see somebody who's got charisma, and sort of superficial, charm, You've got to look beyond that and, take your time. Don't rush things. Okay, so verse number 12. Far finer than a wish-fulfilling gem, this life with leisure found but now, this once. So hard to find, soon lost, a lightning flash. Reflecting in this fashion, realize well, all worldly deeds are but as winnowed chaff. So always seize its essence day and night. I too, a yogi, practiced in this way. You too, who yearn for freedom, do the same. So that I find a very eloquent verse myself. So we always talk about the precious human rebirth at this time, the life with the 8 leisures and the 10 fortunes, as it's set out in more detailed text. But it's just trying to tell us, how lucky we are. We've been born human, and we've been born, where we've actually, probably most of us have managed to get a good education. Probably most of us, and obviously some people here have probably had very difficult lives. I'm not sure, and very difficult health conditions, and so on and so on. So I can't talk for everybody in the audience, but in general, if you had that kind of birth as a human, where your parents have loved you and you've managed to get some sort of education, and then you've met the Dharma teachings with a mind that's sort of able to receive them without any sort of great obstacles, like there's no freedom in your society, or everybody in your society by law has to follow this different religion, and so on and so on. So you've come a very long way just to get a precious human rebirth. You're not born as an animal. You're not born as one of those creatures who spends a whole life suffering in some sort of lost place in the universe, which is far from wherever any Buddha ever having taught there. And think how long it took for the Buddha to come and teach on this earth, right? 4 billion years, was it? How long has life been evolving on this earth? It's something about like 4 billion years. If the earth is 4.5 billion years old, life on this earth is, supposed to have started about 4.1 billion years ago. So how many years is that to wait, for a Buddha to come along? And finally, they did come along, and we're in the aftermath. We're in a place where the teachings are still surviving, and not only that, you can just, with a flick of your computer, you can get very authentic teachings, just sitting in your own living room. You don't have to, go to any trouble whatsoever, except just have a good internet connection. So how fortunate is all that? You know what I mean? And this last one, it says, what is that verse? This line about all worldly deeds are but as winnowed chaff. So I really love that line, because I was up in the mountains, meditating and helping my friend up there with a school. This isn't in Tibet, but in the Buddhist part of India, in the high Himalayas. So I used to go up there quite often, because helping with a school project there, started by one of my schoolmates from the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, and he's got a very successful program of education there. So I used to go up there and have a good time, because he'd look after me and find me places where I wanted to go. And so you could see the traditional way of life was still there. When I got there, it was like weren't so many tourist people just living in the subsistence economy, so they were growing their own barley, and they were harvesting it by hand, So it's very touching to see that. And these people, such connection with the earth, but very hard work, of course. Then the time comes that they've got to thresh the grain, They've got to get the grain. They harvested it, they let it dry out, then they've got to get the grain to separate from the stalks. the threshing, you know, so they have the animals going round and round treading on the grain to get the you know, the grain to separate from the chaff. But you know, then they've got to pick it up and then they've got to winnow it. So they have these winnowing baskets. So they lift the grain up on a winnowing basket and they sort of shake the basket, and the grain is sort of falls down. But the wind hopefully takes the breeze, takes the chaff. You see, the chaff is very light, but the golden grain is falling down into the, you know, onto the earth in front of the woman as she's shaking her basket, and hopefully there's a bit of a breeze that takes away the chaff. And that's what Sankar was obviously talking about. Something that you'd see every day or every year in his society. So the little children are playing about, you know, so they're chasing the chaff. You know, the chaff is blowing away down the valley, down the huge mountain sides, you know, off into space, and all the children are playing and laughing and kind of, you know, trying to grab the chaff. But what they really want is the golden grain, and that's just dropping into the mother's lap, you know, that's just dropping onto the earth. You see, so, you know, everybody in the world, if they're just chasing after worldly pleasures, it's just like the children chasing after the chaff and missing out on the golden grain altogether. So they're completely wasting their precious human rebirth. What a tragedy that is. So even if we have got the best of the best of the best of rebirths in cyclic existence, which we have, you know, there are places more pleasurable, but they're not so good for practicing the Dharma because they're too pleasurable, you know. So you never get around to practicing the Dharma because you're having too much pleasure in one of those higher divine realms or something. So even, but this one, even the best of the best of the best of rebirths in cyclic existence, it's only very temporary, you know. It's only so transient. It's only so like you know, evanescent, vanishing away. So that's verse number 13. Not sure death brings no birth in evil realms. Convinced the triple gem relieves that fear. Takes steadfast refuge. Precepts untransgressed. So, you know, the next meditation after precious human rebirth, a meditation on death. You know, everything's impermanent. And in cyclic existence, the impermanence means it loses its flow. You know, it loses its ability to stay what it is. Even the Buddha's mind is impermanent, but it has this ability to continue on being the Buddha's mind. It doesn't degenerate, it doesn't disintegrate into something worse. But everything in cyclic existence, you know, because the causes are impure and everything, you know, everything in cyclic existence becomes, you know, goes to the dogs, let's say. You know, it kind of, you know, wears out, or, you know, it kind of, you know, lets you down, or, you know, hits you in the face. You know, the thing that you thought was going to give you so much happiness becomes a, you know, a source of great misery and argumentation and kind of, you know, loss and grief and so on. So everything is taken away from you, even your special, glamorous, handsome young body. So no time to waste. Yeah. So this is the opposite of the precious human rebirth meditation is the, you know, death and impermanence. So we have to think, where will we go from this life? Yeah? And we could easily go into a lot worse situation. If you think the universe is having this whole sort of spectrum of happiness and suffering, right from the deepest suffering, right up to the most pleasurable happiness within the round of birth and death, that's kind of a spectrum, you know. And the universe is so big, then the whole spectrum, all the places on the spectrum, presumably, are going to be occupied. Yeah, so there are people suffering really intensely, or beings, let's say, in their kind of cut off worlds of misery. Even while there are beings at the other end of the spectrum meditating on bliss and you know, sort of peacefulness, or, you know, a few eons before they too have to go back down through the process of rebirth. And where will they end up? You know, so you can fall from a high, very pleasant, marvelous, happy realm into a realm of great suffering. So it's all possible. You've got the karmic seeds, you've got the negative karmic seeds, which can ripen up unless you purify them all. So this is the way of psychic existence, you know, from birth to death and back again, from happiness to suffering and back again, you know. So it's all like that kind of a turmoil, and it's very hard to, in worldly terms, to direct that. So what you need is Dharma practice. And then here it's mentioning karma, of course. Yeah, so the next part of the verse, yes, you have to take refuge. That's going to be your main, you know, your starting point, or your kind of, you know, basic practice, all the way up to enlightenment. You still keep taking refuge, keep the precepts of refuge. And also, reading from the verse again, and also it depends on this. Think well on actions, black and white, and their effects, then do or cast aside who should be done. I too, a yogi, practiced in this way. You too who learn for freedom do the same. So the next message after taking refuge is then now think about karma. It doesn't think about now this is how you escape from psychic existence. Just jump out of it, step by step. So the first thing is, suffering comes, as we put out suffering, so it will come back to us. As we put out happiness to others, make them happy, then there is a hope that, that will ripen up back to us as happy effects for us too. So this is the working of karma. What you put out, you get back. Very good way to think, I think, so we've got to, by all means, to refrain from, doing actions which, land others up in happiness, land others up in unhappiness and misery and dissatisfaction, or, death. We just want to kill those creatures so we can eat their bodies. So all those negative actions. So let's avoid them. Practice virtue. We have the opportunity. This is our chance. Think if you were born as an animal. Think as you're born as a little bird in the spring, trying to feed her hungry babies. How many little caterpillars and grubs and bugs does that little beautiful little bird? Beautiful, charming little, garden bird. How many little caterpillars and grubs and the little insects does she or the parents have to catch to feed their, a little nest full of babies? So many, and that's compulsive. The mother's just compulsively doing it. So you say to yourself, is that really a negative action? That mother's just feeding her children. Isn't that something that she should do? Well, of course, but it's a negative action is like if you want to do it, killing in this case, and then you do it. So you actually catch the caterpillar, and it's going to go down into the mouth of your baby. And then you're satisfied when you've done it. So then it's a fully qualified negative action of killing. So there's no, it's less of a negative action, or it's not a fully qualified negative action because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know it's a negative action. It's still, you're doomed to do a fully qualified negative action. You can say, yes, well, the little baby, the little bird, it doesn't know that it's doing a negative action, so it can't be quite so serious. Well, maybe not. We know it's a negative action to kill somebody, and then we do it, So that is something kind of, there maybe is more horror in that, We accept that killing is negative, but we're overwhelmed by our greed or something, or our hatred or something, so we do an act of killing. We kill, for our food, or we kill out of revenge or something. So maybe our negative action is worse than the negative action of the little bird who's only trying to feed her babies, and she doesn't know it's a negative action. She just does it because she's under a compulsion. But it's still a fully qualified negative action. It's still enough to get you an unfortunate rebirth. The desire to do it was there. You discriminate the victim. I want to kill that little creature, for my satisfaction, for my trip, my agenda. And then you do it, and then afterwards you feel satisfaction. I've done what I wanted to do. So that's a fully qualified negative action of killing. So that bird is doing them how many times in the spring with dedication. So that's the kind of kindness that mothers have for us, that they will do those kind of negative actions over and over again just for the sake of their children. So that's kind of from the side of the children, that's great kindness. But you can see from the side of karma, it's not pretty at all. So we who have some sense and ability to listen to teachings, to weigh things up, so why should other creatures suffer at our expense? Why should we have the happiness and just give them the suffering and ignore their plight? That's not the way that you're going to get the world working in your favor. If you do that, short-term benefit may be, long-term, all that negativity you put out, you're going to get back. So that's fair enough. But it means we're in great danger all the time. The lower realms are very great suffering. To be born as an animal, be born as something worse than that. They're very, very great suffering, and it's easy to go there. It's easy to go there. One negative action has to ripen up to throw you into the lower realms, So that's just at death time. So you have to be very careful and do all the purification you can. So the next verse talks about purification. Number 14. Form well endowed to win the highest path. Till that is found, there's no progressing far. Train in its causes, nothing incomplete. So the form they're talking about is this fortunate rebirth, you see. If you're going to progress to Buddhahood, certainly, you need to have a series of good lives, a series of good rebirths, a series of, let's say, precious human rebirths, where you can practice the Dharma and learn about the Bodhisattva's actions all over again, renew your Bodhisattva vows and carry on, on your Bodhisattva journey. So you need, a special type of rebirth to be able to do that. Until you're very advanced, that will be a human rebirth, Maybe you can have bodhisattvas who are animals, maybe you can have bodhisattvas who are gods in the higher realms, but they're more advanced beings, for the average person, the beginner, the junior bodhisattva, we must have this rebirth that we've got now and then keep on getting them. So how hard is that going to be, with global warming coming along? Our precious human rebirth on this earth is going to be very hard to find, I think. But at least, we've got to lay down whatever imprints we can. We've got to make it as possible as we can. And then, the next verse is now this purification, and all the negative actions we've already accumulated, they're sort of just waiting to ripen, waiting to come out and give us suffering. Then we have to purify them, and we can do that. So it says, continuing the verse number 14, it's vital 3 doors soiled with wrongdoing stains be cleansed, not least of karmic hindrances. Be always keen to use the full 4 powers. I too, a yogi, practiced in this way. You too, who yearn for freedom, do the same. So the 4 powers they're talking about are the 4 ways, the 4 steps of doing an act of purification where you've done something wrong. Whether it's an act of a misdeed that you remember, that you're embarrassed about and ashamed of and you regret, or it's something you can't remember because it's in a past life, that's far away from you being able to recall it, but it's still, probably you've done all these negative actions anyway in previous lives. You've got to purify all those too. So you use the full 4 powers. So it's like something like you take refuge, then you experience regret, you dilute the regret. You don't say, I'm a bad person, I'm guilty, I'm wrong, I'm just a shameful, useless thing. You don't devalue yourself like that, but you just recognize I did something wrong, and I mustn't, I must acknowledge that, and I cause suffering to others. This is how I did it, remembering what happened and regretting it, and so that helps you, to sort of once you accept that it was a wrong idea and bring that to mind. That's part of the process of purifying. And then you can do your purification practice, which is maybe something very Buddhist, like, reciting the scriptures, or, bowing down in front of the statue of the Buddha, and, that kind of, specifically Buddhist purification practice. But I think also, doing virtuous actions with purification motivation is okay too, helping others and doing actions which are, sort of strongly virtuous, with the idea that may this purify my negativity, I'm sort of making up for the wrong I've done, kind of. So there's purification practices, purification meditations, different varieties. And then at the end, the last hours is when you sort of make a resolve not to do the action again, or not to do it absolutely as much as possible. Be realistic. Maybe you will have to do it again, but do it again, but try to refrain as much as possible. So you've got refuge, regret, and then your remedy, which is your opponent, kind of antidote of doing something pure or white instead of wrong and black, and then resolve not to do that and get into the same sort of mistaken ways again. So that's talking about making progress throughout your lives, and taking refuge, and thinking about karma carefully, and then purifying. Try to give yourself the best chance possible in the future, lay down good imprints instead of and purifying away the negative ones. So that brings us to verse number 15, which is about the Four Noble Truths. So that's the last verse for today. But I said I would stop and ask if anybody's got questions. So please take a chance to ask if you want to ask something.
Okay, it's Graham. We do have a question from Kevin. So he's asked me to ask the question. Question here is: many Thai Buddhists think Buddhahood is beyond them, and to get another human life is the best they can hope for. How do we help them? And also, are there any thoughts on, from what you've just said about negative actions, are there any thoughts about monks, for example, in Thailand, they eat meat and fish, etc.?
So the first thing is that they don't aim for Buddhahood because they think it's too difficult, and so. But they're interested in liberation. Really, you're saying over that they just hope for or pray for or work for a precious, good human life in the future. But aren't they aiming to get out of cyclic existence? Their own sort of.
Can I just say, I have a Thai wife and Thai family, and that is all they hope for is just to get another human rebirth. They don't think it's possible.
Yeah, but in the Thai tradition, it's very common that people, the monks at least, and the nuns are going for freedom from cyclic existence. So that is an ideal within the society. It may be not for your own particular, close ones. But. So yes. Anyway, you're thinking about your wife and whoever else you mentioned there. Well, the stages of the path teaching takes them into account. You see, so this is how to get a good human rebirth. And you could have the getting good human rebirth as a motive for that. So in my next life, then I will be able to study a bit better. In my next life, I will be able to, maybe have more leisure or more intelligence or more education or whatever, so that I will get more support. So I can, raise my aspirations a bit higher. But for now in this life, I'm too busy or too many obstacles. But you can have the aspirations in the next life. You could become. A monk or a nun or something. So is that beyond the possibilities in this particular case? So okay.
Just think about it. They don't get any teachings from the temples.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is about offerings. I've actually lived with the forest monks who are quite different, and the people associated with them. I lived with them for 6 months.
Yeah.
And they really do strive for liberation, and the people who follow them. But most Thai people, they don't even keep the 5 precepts here. Alcoholism is a big problem. Corruption is a big problem. I find it quite difficult. I only stay here because I can't bring my wife back to the UK because of the visa situation.
Oh, you're in Thailand?
Yeah, I've been here since 2007 with 4 years in China.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I came here as a volunteer teacher, no TEFL, no degree, left my call centre job, and was offered a permanent position. And I taught 7 years here, 4 years in China.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, well, that's samsara, isn't it? But Tom Carper is encouraging people to aim higher. But of course, he recognizes that obviously in Tibet, people are very much the same. They have such a hard life. They're so near the poverty line. His day, right? And illiterate. How many of the population, the mass of the population, will be literate? And they wouldn't be even allowed to leave the land if they wanted to. To go somewhere else to try and improve their lot. It wasn't allowed. But their children could enter a monastery. So yeah, so they had huge obstacles to practicing the Dharma in a kind of a full-on type of long-term way, didn't it? So that's nothing new. But it's a shame if people can't aspire at least to doing better than that. Say, okay, well, I'm not much good in this life, but at least they can aspire to doing better and looking up towards at least liberation from cyclic resistance, if not full Buddhahood, which isn't such a popular what is it, ideal that's realistically practiced or aimed for in Thailand, right? That most of those monks, they're going for their individual liberation. Is that fair to say that, Kevin?
I would say a lot of the monks are, particularly in the forest edition. A lot of people are monks here because it's an easy life.
Yeah, but
and there are certain criminal offences that you can either go to jail or become a monk for so many months. And I'm not being horrible, but if you want drugs, many of the temples are the places to go to. It's not what when you actually live here, you see a different side.
Yeah, but I'm sure, yeah. Okay.
And nearly every day there's corruption found at some temples here.
Yeah. Let's not criticize. I'm sure that, the bad side of human nature is found everywhere, whether it's Thailand or...
I'm saying the forest edition that I got involved with, and we also had a Zen group in Mae Sot when I lived there. No problems at all. Because they get up at 4 o'clock, 4:30 prayers, meditation, 6 o'clock out collecting their offerings. And at 2 of the temples, I ran the kitchens as well. So I lived in 3 of their temples.
Yeah, so that's good. There are people who are doing it properly. But you can see, even the ones in Thailand that you've mentioned, it just sounds like, let's say, just liberation, individual liberation from the round of samsara is what they're intently striving for. They don't have the idea of going for Buddhahood, which is what Tsongkhapa's urging, from his Mahayana perspective, or the Nalanda tradition that Dalai Lama talks about, where as many people as possible are encouraged to go for the highest goal of full, complete enlightenment. But it's very difficult, It takes, many lifetimes. It's not just like, done in 2 or 3 lifetimes. It's many lifetimes, and many aeons even they talk about, You've got to keep going, and once you realize how, the terrible suffering of psychic existence really hits you, like you really practice and meditate on it properly, then it's no joke. And then if somebody says, oh, I can't bear the thought of all that suffering from lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, I've just got to go for my own liberation. You can't criticize it, because they're just, they just got to get out, because psychic existence they see is such a, a round of, confusion and suffering and kind of, disappointment, dissatisfaction, even if you are born as a human. And so many human rebirths are so far from being precious human rebirths. So, a person going for their own liberation, you can't really blame them. And then somebody's only got the idea of having a happy rebirth in future. Well, then that is something they can practice validly for. They can do good deeds. They can practice the 5 precepts, whatever it is they have in Thailand. So if they do keep their karma sort of get it purified, the negatives they've already done, and then in the future they do try to lead virtuous lives, and avoid things like whatever, alcohol or misdeeds, then it will be worth doing, because they will have a precious human rebirth possibly in the future. So it's worth striving for. So you encourage them at whatever level of practice they're at, to be virtuous and to avoid the corruption. So you've got to kind of give people the boost that's suitable for them, haven't you?
Well, I try to lead by example. Like when I first met my wife, she thought she could only pray at the temple. Now she prays every day at home and meditates before she goes to work. But this is the sort of lot of misconceptions they have here.
Yeah,
temples seem to want to control the people.
Yeah, well, let's not criticize. It's just you just do what you can, and if nobody's listening to you, you can teach the Dhamma. If nobody listens, then that's that's the way it is. So you have to put up with that. It's like you only do what you can, and if what you can do is only a little small bit, still that's worth doing. So
it's not a lot of different to the churches in the UK.
Yes, well, I'm sure we're bound to be similarity.
So we've
yes, any questions? Yes, so Jason.
Branwyn's got a hand up. Branwyn, I don't know if you've got.
Yes. First, I'd just like to observe that yes, the samsara crops up all over the place. But my question is, the Lamrim, it presents itself stages of the path or the graduated path. And from my cultural background, that reminds me of the piano lessons I had when I was a child. And you'd start with, you know, something very simple, and then you do your piano lessons and you'd go through the different grades, and then you could play your Beethoven properly. Or it's like a train journey. And so when I see, you know, the stages of the path, it feels like one should be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you definitely get there. And being a Westerner, there's that expectation that if you work at it for 10, 20 years, you'll get there. And my experience isn't that. My experience is that I'm dabbling around, part of me quite very near the beginning, trying to develop right speech, and then part of me somewhere towards the middle with a bit of patience and equanimity and compassion. And I've been doing that for decades, and it sort of feels all right, but it feels more like hanging out in a couple of places on the path rather than traveling along it. And the eventual direction is a great direction, but boy, does it feel a long way off. But I just wonder if is it all right? Should I be actually more A to B about A to Z about it? Or thank you.
Well, I feel the same way, actually. I have to admit it. That if I had a tiny actual realization, I'd be delighted. And I'm getting pretty, you know, getting to the stage where I can say I've been doing it for decades. So, you know, where's this? That feels like a ceiling on my happiness. And if I had, you know, are you happy in what you're doing? I say yes, but if I had some actual realization or something, some kind of actually developed some virtuous mind and bodhicitta or something, I would feel sort of a bit more satisfaction that I've got where I'm supposed to get it, a bit nearer. You know? So, yes, but what do you say to that then? Well, all those texts I try to study, like Nagarjuna and all these people talking about deep wisdom and all that, I don't get tired of studying. I don't get tired of trying to find out what they're saying, you know. Even if I'm only at the level of hearing, you know, studying, you know, you're supposed to study and then contemplate, where you actually realize what they're saying with some sort of, you know, conceptual mind, and then you go to meditation, where you really meditate strongly on your realization to make it into a perfect direct realization of the truth and so on. I still feel I'm with my Nagarjuna at the hearing stage, the first study stage, without developing any actual correct, you know, sort of realization. But it's still fascinating. It's still like, you know, I never tire of getting, you know, down to his books, what he's saying, and figuring it out in whatever language, like Tibetan or Sanskrit or something, you know, and really working at it. You feel you're sort of making progress, and maybe that's all you can ask for, really. But you feel that, well, for me personally, I mean, I never got sort of bored with it. I'm trying to do my practice properly, and the challenge, you know, working for the benefit of others. People spend their whole lives doing that, so it's not like they must have their own progress of their own Dharma realization. But you know, so long as they've done so much as they could for the sake of other beings, then they've spent their life well. And how can you sort of, you know, you say, well, they haven't had time to study because they've been busy with their projects, but, you know, helping others. So that's great too, you know. So we just have to be satisfied with what we've got, I suppose.
Mm.
I'm like you, Branwen.
Sorry?
I'm like you, you know, I wish I'd had a bit more progress than what I've got. But you'll always feel like that, you know, even if you have realized some realization like emptiness, you're still thinking, oh, well, why haven't I realized it directly? Or why haven't I managed to do this, that, and the other, even if you haven't got quite far on the path. So I think it's going to be like that, even if you are more advanced too. Yes, any more questions?
Thank you.
Ruth is raising her hand.
Hello, I'm sorry, I didn't know how to do the electronic hand. First of all, I want to thank you very much and thank everybody for doing this. It's wonderful. A strange question occurred to me. I'm a bit shy of asking it, but it occurred to me, isn't it egotistical to think that human rebirth is the best opportunity for enlightenment? I know it's a strange question, but it just occurred to me, so thank you.
Well, that's what it's called, the process of human rebirth. I mean, but in another part of the universe where the Buddha's taught, come down to earth, maybe the people don't look anything like us, so we maybe wouldn't call them part of the human species. But they have the opportunity through their, whatever it is, intelligence and a bit of leisure, you know, a bit of resources, to be able to, you know, sort of practice the Dharma. They've had the teachings and they can get on with it. They don't necessarily specifically have to be human beings, but it's just that in our experience in this world, that's, you know, this is what human beings look like. They look like us, so we've got the best opportunity. Well, you know, would you rather be born as an animal? You know, people might say, yeah, animals have a good time, but when you think about it, really, you know, like my description of the little bird, it's like, it's very, their actions are very instinctive, very compulsive. And the little bird that such as I was thinking of, and the garden bird, there are very many predators. So, you know, it's no joke. And, you know, when the weather is cold outside, there's no way they can come inside and get warm. You know, they just have to put up with it, don't they? And, you know, and if the frosts are very severe for a few days, some of these little birds, they do drop dead. Their bodies are so vulnerable and small. You know, as soon as the weather turns really cold, these ones that don't migrate. You know, so would you really be born? Is there anything that's really worthwhile about another kind of rebirth like that? And then there are these divine beings in samsara who have much more pleasure than we do. But then they don't get on with the Dharma because it's too easy and they're having such a good time that the mind doesn't get around to thinking about things seriously. So that's no good.
I think it was the you know, just thinking, you know, is it egotistical? I'm not. I mean, I trust the human rebirth, for example, the Dalai Lama. You know, he's an amazing being, for example. But yeah, I was just kind of analyzing the egotistical concept of that. But yeah. Yeah.
We're not supposed to put ourselves above other creatures in terms of, oh, you know, because we're humans, we're allowed to, you know, treat all the other creatures as our resources, you know, and not have any, don't have to care about if we cause them suffering or not. You know, that's like, that would be egotistical, wouldn't it? My happiness is yours. We're not supposed to think like that. If you think like Dalai Lama and, you know, the great Buddhist masters that we're talking about here, other people's and other creatures' happiness is you take that to be more important than your own. You have to swap your you know, you stop being self-cherishing and cherish others. You know, that's the main thing of the Bodhisattva path. That you work for the benefit of others, and then you'll get happiness. That's a mystery. And if you work for the benefit of others, you know, then you get true happiness. If you just think, oh, I'm more important than other people, my happiness is more important than anybody else, you're either one of these self-centered people, then you're kind of frustrating your own happiness, actually. So don't be.
Well, thank you.
I think Jill, you raise your hand.
So just to take my mic off. Yes, I did. I liked that question, Ruth. And I've often pondered that. And I don't know whether it's what you're thinking, but there's always something in my mind about, as human beings, as the human species, that we do seem to assume that we are the more intelligent. And I know, you know, people will argue in terms of brain capacity and size and so on. I don't know whether I understand it, but I get that point. But in terms of, you know, we have been given, or we have arrogance, this idea that we are more intelligent, that we do know better, and yet we are the ones that are disturbing the natural balance of the earth and the environment in which we live. And whereas animals naturally would keep that natural order and that natural balance as predators in a, you know, as I said, a natural order of things. So yeah, I've often wondered, you know, why do we assume we want to strive to be reborn in a human form? when I think animals probably left to their own devices would be closer to enlightenment, maybe.
You do? Do you think that? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm in the thinking process, or in the process of thinking it through. But I just liked what Ruth said. I think there is a discussion to be had there at least.
I think it's egotistical that we called Homo sapiens, and we seem to be making such a mess of the whole world now.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem very sapiens, does it? Homo sapiens and femina sapienta. We're making a right mess of the whole show.
Well, exactly. I think that's it.
We rename ourselves now. Give ourselves something else. But I don't know Latin well enough to think of a good name. Yeah. So there's 7 billion of us. So why do we keep wanting more? You know, another human rebirth. There's too many anyway. And that's half the problem, isn't it? There's too many of us, that we're just crowding out everything else with our domestic animals and our growing our soya beans where the forest once flourished, you know. So it's nothing much to be proud of, really. But it's just inevitable victims of our own success. That's samsara, isn't it? You know, you work out how to live a relatively comfortable life compared to animals that don't have any, you know, medical kind of, you know, fixes for their illnesses. We have a sort of fantastic medical advances and so forth. You know, so life expectancy is what, doubled since 1900 or something. The human life expectancy on the planet is supposed to be double what it was in 1900, just to the advances of this century. You know, so you know, but all those sort of fantastic successes like that, I say, oh, it's marvelous. You know, and how to, you know, grow more food on less land. You know, with the green revolution and all this thing we have. But it all ends up blowing up in our faces, isn't it? We just sort of overexpend our budget. You know, and all our ingenuity ends up doing is kind of wrecking the planet. You know? So it's not something to be that we say, oh, we're the top species that knows what it's doing. It's not true at all. But having said that, I don't think it's going to be any use to be born as anything else, at least on this planet. You know, what other creature is there who can, you know, absorb the Buddhist teachings and make progress? You know, even discriminate between virtue and non-virtue. Yeah. So you know, maybe we have to go off and be reborn on another planet if this one lets us down. But just being born as some kind of creature on this planet, or you know, within cyclic existence, you know, broaden the question out to the other types of realms that they talk about that you don't see manifestly on this planet, but the gods and the hell realms and so forth. You know. So where do we go if we're not human? What else do we you know, opt for?
Straight to Buddhahood.
Straight to Buddhahood, yeah. Well, you lead the way. I'll follow. Yes.
Can I come back at that point? I think that point that you make there, Geshe Graham, is really, really interesting. And it just, as soon as you said it, it just struck me, well, maybe we as human beings need the Buddha's teachings because of all those things we've just said about ourselves.
Yeah.
We are not that intelligent, and we are not using our brain capacity in an intelligent way, and therefore we are the ones that need the Buddha's teachings. You know, I don't think my cat does. He seems far more sensible and non-grasping and living in the moment, and accepting of what is than I am. So I need it probably, and he doesn't.
So you're going to pray to be reborn as a cat in your next life, are you then?
I'd like to be my cat, or a cat that's living in an environment that I share with him.
Yeah, but a cat can go shopping at IKEA, can it? Come on.
I don't like shopping in IKEA. I hate shopping in IKEA. That would be suffering for me.
I quite agree. Yeah.
That's good. Can I ask a quick question, if that's all right?
Yes, Jason.
So you talk about aiming for another human rebirth to continue your practice, but there's a chance that the volume of human rebirths are dwindling on this planet, at least. What do you say then about the idea of cause and effect? If I definitely follow the advice of the teachers, i.e., don't do these actions, try to do more of these actions, is it guaranteed that I'm going to get another human rebirth or not?
Well, there might be a problem, isn't it? I think about that. You know, everybody's got their good actions which could ripen up into them being reborn as human. But if the human species, like all these other species, a kind of, you know, a collapse, a population collapse because of, you know, climate stress and all that, then there won't be many human rebirths around left to take, will there? So you'll have all these good imprints, but you'll be fighting over the rebirth, you know. They like all these sort of bardo beings will be fighting over this fertilized egg of a human, you know, it's my turn, I'm going in there. And the other ones will say, no, I want to get reborn in that egg, you know. So it'll be a right chaos. No. Well, I'm saying, you know, you can have all the good conditions, but if there's no human rebirth to be had, then you'll just have to have something less, won't you? But you'll have the good imprint. So when the time comes again, you know, when the earth becomes flourishing again, if it ever does, of course, you know, when the worm turns, you know, when another 10 million years passes, you know, and so life on earth starts to flourish again, and humans can evolve again, or, you know, whatever they can do, like, you know, start to increase in numbers again, you will have the good imprint. That's all you can say. Or you can be born on another planet. So that's always possible. You can take a human rebirth to another planet. You know, I don't think that's impossible. Especially if you've got the imagination. I sort of feel attached to this earth, but other people can feel I've done all this tantric practice or something. So if you know, they see the universe in a different way and they get reborn on a different planet. You know, there's no, in principle, that's supposed to be possible, isn't it? So keep on laying down your imprints, you see. So you just do the best you can. You know?
Yeah, and then, but I guess that's fine. You know, you're kind of looking for some guarantee, aren't you, in a way? But what do you do in the meantime then? Where is the mind just abiding in some restless state, or what?
You get reborn as a worm at the bottom of the ocean for 10 million years. But when you get that chance to be human again, then yeah, you've got the opportunity. You've got the karmic seed which ripens up at death time, and you get a human rebirth when they come around again. Being a bodhisattva takes ages, man. You know, it's not like, oh, it just happens in a few lifetimes. It takes hundreds of years, thousands of years, and lots of lifetimes. You know, it's a great progress over many lifetimes. So if there's a 10 million year gap, then that's nothing. You know, that's just the way it is. Like there was one teacher, I think it was my friend went to India, and he's a sort of student of Tai Situ Rinpoche. You know, he's in the Kagyu line. So he said they went to see Tai Situ Rinpoche in his monastery, which is somewhere near Dharamsala. You know. So they were having an interview with him, and somebody said, you know, one of the students, like my friend, who would come to, you know, just say hello to him and give him a little, you know, have a little audience with him. So the student sort of says, oh, I'll just pop out and get my camera. I'll just be a minute. So Tai Situ says, a minute or 1,000 years, it makes no difference to me. Like as a bodhisattva, it doesn't, you know, it's like, you know, he's just practicing the path of a bodhisattva. It's not like, oh, I hope enlightenment's around the corner now. You know, it's just like you're just practicing the bodhisattva. You know, you just go on and on and on. It's like that's your great happiness. So you're serving sentient beings, and if enlightenment comes, that's great. But it's not like you're down to this minute or this 10 million years. You're just sort of doing a vast practice at all times. So that's what he said. That's what my friend said. He thought Tai Situ Rinpoche had said. You see, a minute or 1,000 years, it's all the same to me. If he did say that, I thought it was rather funny. Anyway, maybe we should do a bit of a meditation now. It's good to have a more or less half an hour meditation. So I'll just read the verse about the Four Noble Truths, which is 15, which is where I wanted to stop today. We haven't had time to discuss it, but I mean, kind of, you know, explicitly, we've been talking about the Four Truths implicitly. So that next time when we get together, when it's confirmed, we'll start with the awakening of compassion, bodhicitta, and so on, which is verse 16. But for now, just the four truths. Unless you strive to know true suffering's faults, no genuine urge for freedom grows. Think too on origins, samsara's causal stage. If not, you won't know how to cut its root. So then despair of and renounce the world, all keen to know what binds you to the round. I too, a yogi, practiced in this way. You too, who yearn for freedom, do the same. So we'll try to meditate our way through those thoughts. So we're just in the peace of trying to inspire our own minds again. So bring a bit more of the heart feeling to it now instead of just discussing it. So let's do some breathing meditation first, just to calm our minds down and just go within, be in touch with our emotions and the feelings of our body, and just follow the breath and let things become calm and balanced. So in our previous meditation, we sat in front of Shakyamuni Buddha, took refuge, and tried to generate bodhicitta. So now let us imagine ourselves, in front of Lama. So many guru devotion practices for the Gelugpa tradition, Dalai Lama tradition. Tsongkhapa himself becomes the central figure in our sort of merit field or place for generating inspiration or thinking about the teachings. So we can imagine Tsongkhapa. And if it's too difficult, we don't have to imagine anybody. We don't have to have a visualization. We can just feel his presence. but is just dressed as a Tibetan monk, seated cross-legged on his lotus throne, lion throne. The lotus is supported by snow lions, the Tibetan snow lion. He's wearing the red-colored robes of the Tibetan style, and his hands are sort of in the teaching mudra at his heart. So mainly that means he's holding in his right hand a stalk of a flower, stalk of a lotus or something, and the lotus is blossoming by the side of his right ear, and on top of it is the flaming sword of Manjushri, wisdom. And in his other hand is holding the end of the stalk of another flower which is blossoming beside his left ear, or by his left shoulder, and that is on that lotus there is a text which is Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So those are like the icons to remember Tsongkhapa by, in the absence of realistic photographs or realistic painting. Identify him by his symbols, and he's wearing the yellow pointed hat of the Yellow Hat school, this Dalai Lama tradition, the Lugpa school. And he's beaming and smiling. So to make connection with his teachings, if we like, we don't have to, but those who are happy to do so, we pay homage, which means we can be physically bowing down or just bowing our heads or making prostrations. Or just bowing down with our minds, just respecting him as being a very learned, great spiritual being, just bowing down with our mental kind of attitude, as we like. And people are making offerings, we're also offering beautiful things, traditional Tibetan foods, or beautiful flowers, or beautiful butterflies. All kinds of offerings are possible. And then we offer, then we regret our negative actions. Briefly, we just, in front of the great beings like Tsongkhapa, we regret our negative actions, and he purifies the blessings of his kindness, being so close to his radiant, enlightened mind. Just being close, is a power which purifies our minds if we open up our minds and regret our negativities. And we can rejoice in the virtuous actions of Tsongkhapa, laying out this beautiful Lamrim path, which is, sort of coherent, comprehensive, and not too difficult, because it's set out step by step. Rejoicing the virtues of ourselves. Creatures just looking after their babies, or when they are, great teachers teaching the Dharma. We can rejoice in all the helpful, kind actions. Then we request the Buddha to stay. We request Tsongkhapa to stay in contact. Though he's left this earth, he's departed from this earth, the life he lived here, yet still, there's through his disciples, his power of supernatural power of being a Buddha can still benefit us, bless us, so that we can understand the writings we left behind and so forth, if we open our minds to it. We request him to stay, be present for us, help us, wherever he is, present here also. Then we request teachings, may he turn the wheel of Dharma. And dedication we can leave to the end. So that's the seventh of the 7 in practice, dedication to keep. So the teaching here was about Four Noble Truths. So Tsongkhapa is blessing us to understand this teaching here. So his gentle power, his enlightened mind, the compassion, the wisdom is filtering through the air to us. It's having that subtle effect on our minds, refreshing our energy, making our minds sort of subtle and supple, suitable for able to consider things carefully. So we have to know the suffering of psychic existence in detail, thoroughly contemplated. Samsara. If this isn't all there is nirvana. So we're not just trying to drive our minds into a state of, depression with no alternative. We want to make the best of samsara. We want to make the best of it all. We want to give people happiness in samsara. Nothing wrong with that. But in the long term, in the sort of, going deeper than that, then this isn't a place to find any stable happiness. This isn't a place where we should place, this isn't the place where we should, put our hopes. Inconstant, impermanent, illusory. So inconstant just means undependable. You can't put your trust in it. Constant state of disintegration. So whatever happiness we do build up here, it'll only collapse on a Sunday. And the very things that we take to be happy, that they can be the source of suffering. Just like you eat a good meal, but then if you eat too much of the dessert or something, then you regret it because you've had too much rich food. And at your age, it's you can't digest it so easily. You're not so young, and so forth. So the very things that make us happy can make us very bored or very frustrated if we have too much of them. Just like lying in bed. If you have to lie in bed for 3 days, not allowed to get up, you'd find it very tedious. Even though when you go to bed, you feel, oh, it's nice to relax. I take a rest now. Nice time for sleep. But if somebody made you lie in bed, or as a punishment, and they make you lie in bed for a week or something, then how tedious it will be. So the very things in samsara that are supposed to be happy, they themselves turn into suffering if you just leave them for long enough. Suffering of change. How are you going to be happy inside samsara when you have some sort of, untrustworthy conditions like these, this vulnerable body, vulnerable to so many diseases, so many, kind of breakdowns and faults. You've got to die anyway. So there's an alternative to all this. We're not sort of, we're not programmed forever that we have to suffer. Why should it be like that? Why shouldn't our minds be so pure and perfect, you know, in their possibility? Why shouldn't we have the potential? So it's good to sort of see the faults of psychic resistance and be realistic about that. Because we know there's a place we can get to, you know, we're investigating that, some sort of confidence. This isn't the whole story. Why should it be? You know, the Buddha energy is streaming through the universe. So this location of samsara where we're in, that's maybe the anomaly. You know? Even if there's only one Buddha in the universe, but they send their energy of enlightenment out to all the universe, you know? And immediately it makes samsara just, you know, it's like samsara is like put in its place. Then. It doesn't have to be all samsara, even if there's only one Buddha at the moment. But there are many Buddhas. So it's not like samsara has to predominate at all. You know, it's the Buddha energy that predominates. So we just got to get out of samsara, you know, conquest of suffering. So how do we do that? And we have to see where it's coming from, you know, karma and the afflictions and so forth. Think too on origin, samsara's causal stage. If not, you won't know how to cut its root. So this we haven't really got time for now. We just have to, you know, just describe, you know, yes. Our suffering comes from the ripening up of negative action. We do the negative actions and we have them and done them in the past because our mind is, you know, tempted by the afflictions of attachment and greed and kind of clinging and kind of anger and kind of, you know, aggression and you know, sort of self-centeredness. But our minds don't have to be like that. That's just coming from the ignorance, you know, the very root cause, ignorance, grasping the self to exist in the wrong way. But ignorance will give way before wisdom. Light gives way before darkness. Sorry, darkness gives way before light. Bring the light into the room, the darkness fades backwards. You know? You can't bring darkness into the room to make the light go away. So the wisdom arises and the ignorance will shrink away. So Tsongkhapa's blessing us that we can believe that, you know, that we can investigate that, and verify it for ourselves. Don't just believe it, but, you know, work to understand, you know, the steps he's talking about, the reasons that they're given. Emptiness, no self, freedom. So we ask Sankalpa then to bless us to see samsara as inconstant, impermanent, illusory. We're very suspicious of it, and put our efforts into freedom from samsara. So that is, the truth of suffering. So we work carefully to understand that, and then where does it come from? That's the truth of origins. We understand how we are creating our own suffering in the end because of our ignorance. That's the main cause. But there is a cessation of suffering. That's what Buddha found. Sankalpa has found cessation of suffering. That's truth number 3. Truth number 4, the part of that cessation of suffering. So that's especially meditation on emptiness, clear meditation on no self, the emptiness of mind. That is the meditation which dissolves away the ignorance, which gives rise to the affliction, which gives rise to the negative actions, which ripen up as more samsara. It's all empty. All the 4 truths are just empty of inherent existence. So we were going through the 7 limb prayer, if you noticed. So the last limb of that is dedication. So we have to dedicate our virtues now, dedicate the efforts we've done in our solid morning of effort. And so for that we need the final Lamrim prayer, which I hope you've got in front of you. Then Dalai Lama prayer as well. Long life prayer. Final Lamrim prayer, written by Tsongkhapa, of course. And that'll be it. Through what I've gathered by long efforts here, of 2 collections vast as space, may I become a mighty conqueror, guiding all whose wisdom eye is dimmed by ignorance, until next time held by Manjushri's love. In all lives let me find the best of path, of graduated teachings all complete, and please the conquerors by achieving it, urged on by love's compelling power and skill, in seeing the past essentials as they are, expunging darkness from my greater's mind. The conqueror's teachings may I long uphold, but these most precious teachings of the best have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. With great compassion lifting up the heart, let me reveal this treasure of delight. May to the stages of the enlightening path attain my sons and conquerors one crusade. Bring freedom seekers' minds to glory, and the conqueror's actions long perpetuate. With right conditions bound for following, the gentle path and adverse ones removed. May human and non-humans for all lives
not far from that pure path the conquerors praise. When anyone endeavors to perform the best of victors tenfold their mandates, may those who are mighty always lend their aid, and oceans of good fortune all pervade. Source of this world's every help and joy, wish fulfilling joy, I pray to you. Matchless kind one tends in God's soul, effortlessly be your aims and aims.
So that's it from me. So I bid you goodbye, but I don't know if Jill wants to say anything or anything like that at the end. Okay, Jill.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for all of you for coming along this morning and joining us with Geshe Graham for the teachings. I've certainly found it really interesting. It's been wonderful to go through the translation of the Song of the Path and get a greater understanding of that. So I hope you have too. Again, thank you for coming, and particular thanks obviously to Geshe Graham for being our teacher this morning, and also to Jason for having managed the session for us, and especially the chat. That's been really valuable as well. So I have put some details in the chat to say that there is the next teaching from Geshe Graham. We do have the date, which is the 7th of March. And I understand this will be a continuation of this morning's session, but not to say that any new people couldn't join us. That would be lovely if you can spread the word. Obviously, we'll put the details out again through our mailing list and Facebook, but if you can let more people know, they will be very welcome to join us, but I hope that you can return. There'll be a further session as well, as Geshe Graham mentioned, so the date to just be confirmed, but that will be in April. And in between that, we have some other teachings as well. So Lynn Knight will be joining us, and her first session is going to be on the 14th of March. And she also will be doing a series of teachings for us, and they will be over every month, one a month. And again, we're going to confirm those dates very shortly, but starting on the 14th of March, which is next week. So it'll be lovely to see you all again if you can make it. And yes, thank you very much for supporting us and the centre and enabling us to continue to be a community, even if it's online and not physically. And we just look forward to all being able to get back together physically when we can and when that's the right time. In the meantime, it's lovely to see you on screen, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Geshe Graham. Thank you so much.